Hi, my name is Adam Neely, and I've officially wasted 4 years and 168 days of your collective lives, so I'm sorry about that. This is question and answer time number 10. I just moved, so I'm not really quite sure why I'm still making YouTube videos right now. They take a lot of time. But here, I'm answering all of your questions about bass and music in general, so let's get started.
Question and answer time with
What about Where Are You Now by Skrillex and Diplo with Justin Bieber? Is the bass playing a polyrhythm in the chorus?
Yes, that's a great example of the 4-against-3 polyrhythm in pop music. It's also a great example of the copy-paste method for dotted eighth notes. Now, this is something that's very common in electronic music. Definitely Skrillex did this sort of thing. Basically, what you do is you create a dotted eighth note within a DAW.
A DAW is a digital audio workstation.
And you press Control Paste, and you just keep Control Pasting and just have it keep going and going and going across the bar line. And eventually you get to the point where there's 11 dotted eighth notes. Except the last dotted eighth note is kind of just a little over the bar line, just a little over that second bar line in 2 measures of 4/4. So what you do is you just shorten it, and then you get the rhythm for Where Are You Now? It's really awesome. You should check it out.
Probably my fav Neely vid so far, smiley face emoticon. Any good recommendations for a book on non-functional harmony? If not, I think you should write one so we can throw money at you and/or start a Patreon.
Definitely my favorite textbook on non-functional harmony and just composition in general is 20th Century Harmony by Vincent Persichetti. It's awesome because it is a very descriptivist approach to harmony and to composition in general. It tells you all the things that you can do without telling you things that you should do. So definitely check that out. I really like that textbook.
Isn't it hard to find out where on a fretboard to play something in standard notation as opposed to tabs? The same note exists at different spots, unlike a piano.
Yeah, so technically in the beginning, with standard notation, it will take a little bit longer because you won't know exactly where to play certain notes or certain passages because there are several different places to play them on the instrument. However, over time, when you're learning scales and arpeggios and learning them in conjunction with standard notation, your brain will automatically associate certain passages with certain places on the fretboard, and you won't have to be told because you will already know how a certain passage is supposed to be played. Or you'll know several different ways and automatically pick the best one based upon any number of different circumstances. And that's kind of the nice thing about standard notation is it's a little bit more flexible. It gives you the option of playing it in certain different places depending on certain physical needs. And also with tablature, you're kind of entirely at the mercy of the person writing it because sometimes there might be a better way of playing it or a better way that's more suited to how you play the instrument and how you like to hear a certain passage. So tab can be a little bit restrictive in that regards, and that's why I think that's actually a plus for standard notation.
I'm sure that if your videos include fancier and more creative editing, more people would watch them. I just watch for the content, which makes your channel my favorite music channel, but if you could find a creative experience editor or become one yourself, your videos would be more eyeball-catching.
Yes, of course, I could have fancier graphics, I could have better editing, etc., etc. But you have to understand that I'm not a video editor, I'm a musician full-time. And if I wasn't a musician full-time, I wouldn't be able to create the content that I am for this, like just talking at the camera here. You have to understand that educational channels, like the Idea Channel or Vsauce or whatever, they have entire teams behind them and they're grant funded. This is just literally me talking to a camera and that's all I can do. It takes a huge amount of time just to do this too and be able to create quality content week after week after week. So yeah, technically it could be better, but this is what it's going to be.
How to functionally understand fusion? So far my conclusion is that you can't. How I understand jazz-fusion is simply modulating chords following the melody line so some note in the chord playing is always the same as the melody note on accented beats. Is there any other way of explaining fusion? And is it possible to functionally understand it, using music theory to compose, knowing which kind of chord should come after the previous chord for it to sound fusion?
You can't because it is non-functional. That's the very definition of it. You can't understand it functionally. And if you try and do so, you're going to kind of force it within a box, a Procrustean bed that sort of limits your actual understanding and your ability to grapple with fusion and grapple with modern harmony. And I was once in this boat, and it kind of made me angry that I couldn't functionally understand it. But eventually I realized that you kind of have to understand it compositionally. What are the compositional techniques used to achieve a sound? Maybe it's pattern harmony, maybe it's quartal harmony, maybe you're sort of understanding and using your ear to compare consonances and dissonances. It's a very oral art form that is hard to fit into this box that is normal functional harmony that you have known and learned for so long, and it can be very frustrating not being able to continue that sort of sequential linear pattern of learning more and more about harmony once you start grappling with fusion and modern 20th century harmony. Again, check out Vincent Persichetti's 20th Century Harmony.
Hey Adam, love your videos. I'm starting to learn jazz guitar, and I'm using the Real Book. There are various positive and negative opinions about it. What do you think?
I'm kind of ambivalent about the Real Book because it can be a very useful learning tool, the same way that tablature can be a very useful learning tool. But there comes a point where you kind of want to move away from it because it can be used as a crutch, just the same way as tablature can be used as a crutch. The thing to understand about jazz music and music that you learn from the Real Book is it is something that traditionally was learned just by ear, not from music on a page. And when you wrote music from a page, that was a survival tool. That was a tool for musicians who didn't know a song on the gig to learn real quickly and just have it in front of them. But what it sort of morphed into over the years was it became how musicians learned jazz, and that kind of, I think, is detrimental to the music itself. It's something to just keep in mind. Try and always listen to recordings of the music that you're trying to learn from the Real Book, because there's always added elements of nuance that can be gleaned from them, and that's, I think, what's the exciting thing, and that's the thing that really adds a lot of soul to whatever you're playing.
Scene change.
I'm too high for this.
So I am sorry that you are too high for my video. Completely off a tangent, I just want to tell this story. There was one time in college where my roommate's friends were all getting around and they were all stoned out of their mind, and I decided to play and blast at high volume Open Country Joy from the Mahavishnu Orchestra's album Birds of Fire. And if you don't know this particular album, this particular song, Open Country Joy starts as this sort of nice and sedate pastoral, like quiet little jam for the first minute or so, and then it slowly fades out, and then there's a good 10 seconds of silence, literally 10 seconds of silence, before an explosive unison line happens between the guitar, bass, and violin and drums, and it is just like a crazy moment. And I like to think about like the drop in electronic music and it just being like some crazy thing that happens. Nothing I've ever heard compares to Open Country Joy off of Birds of Fire. Check it out. So I was blasting this, and for the first minute, everybody's like, "Oh, this is cool, man." And then when the drop hit, several people literally freaked out, and one of them was like on the floor, like in the fetal position for like a good 5 minutes afterwards because he just couldn't handle it. So don't get too high and listen to music, because it will destroy you, especially Mahavishnu Orchestra. Word to the wise.
Adam, when you were in music school, were there a lot of women? I've always been a rock bassist and do a little jazz jamming now and then. I've always wondered why it's such a dude fest. The geekier or snobbier the music, the worse it is. Prog rock and technical metal and jazz is almost all dudes. There's all this kind of macho thing going on there. In the classical world, especially strings, I feel like there are more women. Maybe that's because, though it's technical, it has more class? Just wondering.
No, when I was in school, there were not a lot of women, and in the world of professional music, there really aren't that many women, and I think that's a problem. And I think it's also a problem to try and assign a gender-based stereotype to different genres of music. Like classical music is feminine and rock music is masculine. I think that's BS. When you're a young woman or man, when you're just a young person, you want to feel like you have a place, there's a place for you within the music that you're studying. You want to be able to look up to somebody and say, "Hey, I can do that. That's really cool. That's really exciting. I want to be as good as that person." For young men, there are plenty of those role models. For young women, there are a lot fewer. So that's why I think it's very important for there to be very visible female instrumentalists for young women to look up to. The thing is though, even if you have parents which are really encouraging, like, "Yeah, Susie, you shred that guitar. Yeah, someday you're going to be able to do this for a living, or you're going to be able to feel good, really good about yourself. You're going to be able to play in a band. You can do all this cool stuff," because that's not always going to happen. Society is immediately going to react with some petty BS. And you can look no further than YouTube comment sections. The comments are nothing more than, "Oh, that was pretty amazing for a woman or girl. Oh, you're really hot. You're really cute. Will you marry me?" And then immediately after, there are also comments about like, "This is only getting attention because you're a woman. She's not really even that good at all," and blah, 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 blah. "No, I'm only paying attention, I'm only commenting because it's unusual to see." And then, it's all this BS that has nothing to do with the music, nothing to do with the artistic statement, nothing to do with what they're trying to achieve, nothing to do with anything, really. It's just the fact that it's because they're a woman that is playing music. And I think that can be incredibly discouraging. It's a big problem. It's something that I want to talk about a little bit further. I just haven't coalesced all my thoughts. But, thank you for bringing that up because it is something that I've wanted to talk about a little bit on this channel.
Isn't the happiness of the major scale also linked to the Overtone series Strongest Tones? Great video by the EA.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people have brought that up, the fact that the root, the third, and the fifth of the major triad all appear in the first several overtones of the Overtone series. But something that I want to sort of point out about this is that my concept of brightness, like I said in the video, is slightly different than happiness. And yeah, maybe I didn't answer the question, why is major happy, too well in that video. But there are a lot of other things at play. For example, in the Overtone series, the next note after the root, third, and the fifth is the minor seventh. And if you think about how a dominant seventh chord sounds as compared to a major seventh chord, under my definition of brightness, the major seventh chord is more bright or brilliant than the dominant seventh chord, which, yeah, maybe it fits within the Overtone series a little bit better, but it doesn't quite sort of fit within the other thing that I'm talking about, brightness. And, there's other things in the Overtone series that get a little weird because they don't really coincide with our current tuning system. That minor seventh, by the way, is incredibly flat. So yeah, that is something to do with it, and thank you for bringing that up. A concept that is tied into this is the concept of resonance, which Vincent Persichetti in his book 20th Century Harmony talks about a lot, so go check it out.
Good stuff, Adam. Have you read the Lydian chromatic concept of tonal organization? And if you have, did it inspire you to create this video?
I have read the Lydian chromatic concept a while ago. If you don't know what the Lydian chromatic concept of tonal organization is, basically George Russell wrote this book in the 1950s to try and codify the techniques that jazz musicians were using by sort of combining chords and scales, and it's the original chord scale theory. And he approached it in a very novel way. He basically reorganized the entire system of Western music around the Lydian scale instead of the major scale. And there's some reasons why he did this, and some of them are more convincing than others. Some of them really aren't convincing at all, but it's interesting. All of these ideas have kind of faded in favor of Berkeley's approach to the chord scale theory, which is a little bit more kind of along the lines of what I was talking about in the whole brightness video. There's a little bit of the Berkeley chord scale stuff happening in my video. The Lydian chromatic concept is an interesting book, so maybe you should check it out.
Out of curiosity, what was your motivation to learn the bass? It's awesome that we have another bassist who's awesome on here. I just always like to know most people's reasons for learning bass, since most people don't really appreciate it from my experiences.
Very simply, like many other bass players out there, I was asked to join a band when I was 13 years old. I was sort of playing guitar, except there was already a guitar player, and they asked me to play bass, so I was like, sure. And that story is going to sound very familiar to about 50% of you bass players out there, so there we go. My motivation to keep going was the fact that I really just liked bass, and I liked the feeling of control that I got with it. Bass was a very controlling instrument in my mind, and it still is now. You can subtly alter the effect of everything that's going around you just by playing one note. And that's an extremely exciting feeling, and that's kind of what I figured out very early on and have continued to think about in my own playing. So that was my initial motivation. A band was starting.